I'm Larry Jenkins. I grew up in Nashville, North Carolina, and moved to Tennessee in the early 70s and been here ever since. When I was 3 months old, I was adopted by a couple that went to a clinic or a little hospital in Asheville, North Carolina, actually in the Biltmore Village. And these nurses were carrying around a 3-month-old baby. And my adoptive parents had lost a child about 3 years before that. And my to-be adoptive mom asked the doctor, "What's the story on that baby?" And that doctor said, "I'm trying to get that baby adopted." So that started the process of me being adopted. And all my life I was happy where I was. I was blessed with 2 sets of grandparents and a bunch of cousins, and we lived out in the country. But I always was just wonder when a birthday would come up, I'd think, does my birth mom, does she remember me? And anyway, I grew up thinking that, and I remember thinking, I'd like to be in a room with 5 or 10 women and one of them be her. So anyway, I grow up, get married, go to service, and I always knew, and my mom had always told me that there was adoption papers in this lockbox. And Dad was in the hospital, and I got sent home and had a reason to be in that lockbox to get some information. So I look in it, this was in the early 70s, and I opened it up, and I read her name, Callie Catherine McCrary. I go, cool, and I put it back. From early 70s to 1992, I knew her name, I knew where those papers were, and that satisfied me. Well, Mom and Dad were getting older, health going down, and I'm thinking, this lady's getting older too, so if I'm gonna find her, I need to do it. So I started looking, and I called everybody in the community with that last name McCrary, and nobody knew her. So I go to the courthouse in Asheville and go in to see if I can find some birth records. So I tell them what I want, they bring me the books, I open these books up, and I find under Jenkins my birth certificate. And since it's on the same date, there's Callie Catherine McCrary, same date, no father. So I asked for those 2 birth certificates, and they give them to me. All that told me was she was 21, 22, something like that when I was born. So I thought maybe she got married here. So I get the marriage records, and then I find that I get her parents' names, get the county she's from, the next county over. I go to that county, look in the phone book, and there's 3 McCrarys. Get the phone number, bring it home. So Patty said, "You want to call her?" And I goes, "No, I want to meet this woman." And so we made plans, and I go to Asheville. And I wanted to see her because some adoptees find a family that's a mess. And I thought, if it's a mess, I will just say that I saw my birth mom and let it go at that. So I look up her address, and all this is before cell phones and stuff. This is in '93, and I think, okay, I got to go to her house and meet her and I can't knock on the door and go, you want to buy magazines, because that won't last long. So I thought, I'll go past her house, find something, and come back and ask directions to it. So then I get out there and I realize, well, I know people out here. I went to school with people out here. So I thought, I can ask about people longer than I can directions. So I go up to her house, knock on the door, and one of her granddaughters comes to the door, and I asked for the two families I'm looking for, and she said, I don't know them, but my granny might. And I said, is your granny here? She said, no. I started to walk away, and I turned around and I said, what is your granny's name? She said, Catherine Jackson. So I'm at the right house. So I left. I go to the library and go into the archives, and I look up her wedding announcement in the paper. This is the first time I've seen a picture. When I found her marriage license, I saw that she got married in January, and she gave me away in July. And I thought, well, it's the end of the war. He could be still overseas, and she has me, and he's not home, and life goes on, and he doesn't know about me. When I get the wedding announcement out of the paper, and I read it, it says they were married. He's been recently discharged, and they're setting up housekeeping in Nashville or somewhere nearby. So I thought, he's home, he knows about me. This is a game changer. So, still haven't met her. So I'm getting ready to leave town. I go back one more time, go by her house, and all this stuff's rolled up on the dash of my car. And I get out, and she's coming out of the garage, and I said, I don't think I called her by name, because that would I shouldn't have known that. But anyway, I get out and I said, I'm Larry Jenkins from Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm looking for these two families. And she said, oh, I know them. And she pointed out where they lived. And I'm standing there looking at this woman. I'm looking at her hands, her mouth, her face, just soaking her in. And not doing this, and just being cool and calm. And we talked a minute, and she said, if you're from Nashville, Tennessee, how do you know all these people? And I said, well, I went to school at Reynolds and graduated in '64. She said, oh, I had a son graduate in '65. I went to school with a half brother. Anyway, God's timing was in all that. So I left. I didn't tell her who I was, and drove home. A few weeks later, I go back, and Patty had said, you didn't tell her? I said, no, I just wanted to see, because if it's a mess, that would be enough. But I said, she was a sweet, precious lady. So I go back and can't find her at home. And I knew her husband was sick, so I called all the hospitals, wasn't there. Called the funeral homes, wasn't there and hadn't been there. Still can't find her at home. And I thought, nursing home. So again, before cell phones, I go to Shoney's, get a cup of coffee and a handful of quarters, and I'm just going to start calling the nursing homes right around the area. And I asked the guy behind the counter, I said, any nursing homes nearby? And he said, brand new one right down the street. I didn't even call, just drove down there and walked in, and I said, do you have a Raymond Jackson here? And they said, yeah. Told me the room he was in. And I go back to the nurse's station and said, is Miss Jackson with her husband? And they said, yeah. And I said, well, I'll just wait out here. So I waited a couple hours or more, and made sure she was going to come out where I was waiting. And she actually came out of the room one time and saw me and spoke, because she remembered me from being there. So I waited a little bit more, and kind of like the guy in high school waiting on the girl to come down the hall. I run into her, and I go, well, we just keep running into each other. And how's your day? And she told me about what she'd done and come to see her husband who was in the nursing home. And she said, did you find all those people you were looking for the other day? I said, I found everybody I was looking for. And I said, you were so helpful. I got one more person to ask you about. And I said, have you ever seen anybody on TV or something that you'd like to meet? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, you've been on my list for a long time. And she didn't pick up on that. And I said, you were married in January of '46. And you gave a baby away in July under your maiden name. And she got me by the arm and said, are you that baby? And I said, I'm that baby. She said, I have prayed for this day. And I said, well, I'm here. And we sat there in that nursing home lobby and hugged, and laughed, and cried for another couple of hours. And I got in the car and drove back to Nashville and went to work the next day. And I waited a week to call back because as an adoptee, you go find a birth family. You may find a mess, and you may find what I found. She prayed for the day. But you could find, I gave you away once. You could find, I'm glad to meet you, but don't you ever come back. Big, big chance of rejection. And I was blessed I didn't get that. But I waited a week, and I called again, prepared for anything from nice to meet you, but don't come back. And she answered the phone, and I said, this is Larry. She said, I never slept that night. But I'm so glad you came. And we talked, and I didn't know what to call her. I told her, this was sometime later, I said, you're more than Aunt so-and-so, or I said, we're connected. But I said, I'm not a Jackson. If I sit down at your table, I don't know the dynamics, so I'm not trying to be a Jackson. But you and I are connected. If we have a relationship, we'll have to develop it. It could be cards, it could be greetings at birthday or Christmas or whatever, but we'll see. And one time we were out to eat, and she reached across the table and got me by both hands and said, let me look at you. And I shared that story with somebody, and they said, that was her holding that baby the first time. And I was like, wow. So when I saw her again, I told her that, and I said, I got enough room in my heart for two moms, if that's okay. So she became mom to me, and Mama Jackson, or Grandma Jackson to my kids. This woman has been such a blessing to me, and that's what all these tears are about. When I first met her, and I don't mean the first month, I mean years after I met her, my wife could come in and see me, and she'd say, you talked to your mom today, didn't you? I go, yeah, I did. Because she lit me up. She, unconditional love, I mean, just a tough lady. I mean, she'd call your hand on stuff, but if I didn't call her for 10 days, she didn't say, why haven't you called? If I didn't go see her for 2 or 3 months, she didn't say anything about it. She's just glad to see me, glad we could talk. And we talked for hours about everything, from food to politics to kids to travel. She loved to go, and I loved to go. But She absolutely blessed me. I said, "Are you going to tell your family?" She said, "No, I've got granddaughters that wouldn't understand." I said, "Okay, then I won't tell my family." So I said, "But we got to have a story," because we'd go out and with her work in church and school and everything, we'd run into people that knew her and knew me. And so I was her friend from Tennessee, and she was mine from North Carolina. And one day we met a guy. He looked at me and said, "Who are you?" And before I could say anything, she said, "He's a friend of mine from Tennessee." And the guy said, "Well, Catherine, he looks just like one of your boys." And she said, "He is. I claim him," and left it at that. So we went on for 13 years like this. She didn't tell her family. I didn't tell mine. We carry on with our families crossing paths, but never knowing. Now I got 4 brothers and a sister, and out of that bunch, somebody's going to say, "Nice to meet you, but I'd better not see you at Thanksgiving." So the brother that was a year behind me in high school, and she told him. I waited a week, and I didn't hear from him. I called him and just went to voicemail, and I had to go out of town. So that night, I called my wife, and she said, "You're not going to believe what I've been doing." She said, "I've been on the phone with your brother for 3 hours. I said, 3 hours? And she told me what they talked about. She said, "Well, I told Ron that Larry would like to meet you." And he said, "Meet him? I want to get to know him. He's my brother." I said, "He called me brother?" She said, "Yeah." The next one she told was my sister, who's the youngest. She said, "I told Kathy." And I said, "What did Kathy say?" Because Mom was worried about what Kathy might say. She said, "Well, she's standing right here." Kathy gets the phone and says, "Hello, brother." Wow. Every one of those kids, when I met them or talked to them on the phone and they knew who I was, called me brother. It says a lot about her, about how she raised them, the values that she had. That whole family has taken me in. I'm their brother. I'm not their half-brother. I'm not their step-brother. I'm just their brother. We do get together on Thanksgiving. So I've been totally blessed by that family. She said, "I never knew if I had a boy or a girl. They didn't tell me. They didn't let me hold you." She said, "If I'd held you, I'd have probably kept you. If my parents had known about it, they'd have probably kept you." She said, "The nurse did say that you were deformed and the people that were taking you didn't mind." So she said, "All my life I looked at crippled children and wondered if that's my child." She said, "Then I thought, well, maybe he wasn't really, or the baby wasn't really crippled, and if it was a boy, did he go to Vietnam? Did he come back?" She said, "I always celebrated one more birthday in July." So that answers that question. Early on, did she think of me? She did. I told her, I said, "You said if you'd have held me, you'd probably kept me. And if your parents had known, they might have kept me." And I said, "But that was 1946, different time than it is now." And I said, "Had you kept me and we show up at family reunions and stuff, they could go, 'There's Catherine and that baby, and you know about that baby.' There'd be a stigma. There could be, if I was a problem kid, your husband could go, 'He's not mine, deal with him.'" I said, I said, it worked out good. I had a good family. I had grandparents and cousins, and we found each other now. And I told her several years after I'd met her, I said, "I feel like I've been re-raised." And I said, "You've done a great job." And when she told the kids, she said, "They're going to disown me." And I said, "Mom, this is not 1946. I said, "It will be a shock, but they hear stuff all the time. Things happen." And I'm sure it was a shock to be. In fact, one brother said, he said, when you're 50-some years old and you think you got life figured out, and you go see your mom, and she goes, you're not the oldest brother after all. I mean, the woman absolutely blessed and is blessing my soul. Full of energy. She was so social. One strong woman. I said, I'm that baby, and I'm not here to mess up your life. I just wanted to meet you. And I had told her later, I said, I was going to find you if I only found a grave. I said, I had to know. I guess I'm a hopeless romantic and sentimental and stuff, but as an adoptee, I like to think that we were summer romance, young love. And here's another blessing that God gave. And all of her other children will tell you this. I look more like her than any of them. What if I had looked like him? That'd be tough. I mean, I didn't realize I had a big hole in my heart that needed her special kind of love, but she gave it to me. And had that happen, had the event that got me here happened now, there's a good chance I wouldn't be here. And she could have had an abortion then. There was ways to do it, not like now, but she chose life, and I'm glad she did. We do get together on Thanksgiving, so I have been totally blessed by that family. I do have a niece, and she said we would always go see Catherine, and I would tell Daddy on the way, we're going to go see Catherine and her 6 children, and he'd go, Julie, Catherine has 4 boys and a girl. That's 5. And she said, all my life, when we'd had to go see Aunt Catherine, I'd say, we're going to go see Aunt Catherine and her 6 children. It is uncanny how much I'm just part of that family. I mean, and we have a lot in common. It's just like I was always there. She said, God be with you through each step. You will tell it well because of your precious heart. Each one listening will learn a fantastic lesson of love and compassion. My prayers are with you, and you are a blessing to us and loved by our entire family. And that's true. They absolutely do.